A $65 million grant. That's what the U.S. Department of Education promised last April to give Alabama schools. The state is getting 85% of the grant, but it wants all of it. State officials are using that promise in their case tomorrow when a federal judge in Washington decides that the state should be awarded the additional 15% in question. A suit filed by New York and several other states is temporarily keeping the rest of the grant from being allocated, not only to Alabama, but several other states. The amount of funds is based on whether education officials use 1970 or 1980 census figures. If the 1970 data is used, Alabama will suffer a $4 million cut. But using the 1980 census, a $10 million loss is at stake. New York wants the latest census data used because those figures show Alabama had about 34% fewer students from low-income families than in 1970. Education officials in 10 other states which have joined Alabama in this legal question are watching very closely the outcome of the case. If the court rules in Alabama's favor, then what?
We will receive, of course, these basic appropriation we assume received last year, which is approximately $10 million more than we anticipated at this point getting.
But if the state loses?
As a result of this court case, we stand to lose in the state approximately $10 million of what is now known as Chapter 1 money, OESEA Title 1 money.
Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
This building on Washington Street houses the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office Child Support Unit. On Tuesday, someone broke into the Child Support Unit and removed a safe. Today, this man, Rodney Keith Edwards of Cleveland Avenue, was arrested in connection with the crime and charged with burglary and theft of property. This is the safe that was stolen from the Child Support Unit. It also was recovered today, much the worse for wear. And what was in the safe?
Most of it were checks that could not be cashed through a bank. Some of it was some computer tapes they used in their bookkeeping.
Detective Sergeant Hankins says most of the property in the safe has been recovered, including all of the computer tapes. The case remains under investigation at this time by the Crimes Against Property Bureau of the Montgomery Police Department. Sergeant Hankins believes that more than one person was involved in the burglary. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
$1.5 million goes to Dale County, where the Alabama Aviation and Technical College in Ozark will buy high-technology equipment to replace old equipment currently in use. The balance of the funds released today go to grade schools there. The largest slice of the pie goes to Cleveland County for renovations to the Cleveland County High School. Dallas County will now be able to renovate the East Side Junior High School in Selma and rebuild burned-out sections of the Plantersville School. In Perry County, a new elementary school. In Madison County, replacement for the burned-out Central School. Cherokee County can use its share for the second phase of the Cedar Bluff School. Franklin County gets to replace the burned Vena School. Talladega County will see new classrooms at city and county schools. In Lee County, renovations and additions at several schools. The Bessemer City Schools in Jefferson County can repair fire damages at Jess Lanier High School. Chambers County is in line for roof replacements at 3 schools and renovations and additions at Hughley Elementary. And Russell County will also be in line for roof repairs.
Headquarters opening, George Wallace attended a $100 a plate fundraising lunch. Guy Burns, a former Wallace administration cabinet member, was there, as well as Elmer Harris, an Alabama Power Company official, and Dr. Harold Martin, vice chairman of the State Board of Education. Wallace says in these bad economic times, Alabama needs jobs and doesn't need more consumer taxes.
And let us pray that whatever President Reagan does works, since he's the president. I don't want him to fail because he's a Republican. I want him to succeed because he's a citizen of our country. I would want a Democrat to succeed. I'd want an independent to succeed.
Later, at the rally opening his Birmingham campaign headquarters, former Governor Wallace told the crowd when he's elected governor, his contacts with world and national leaders will help Alabama get more jobs. George Wallace wasn't the only campaigner. Bill Baxley supporters were handing out material promoting his campaign for lieutenant governor, and Bill Edwards, a candidate for the Public Service Commission, was there. Some of the senior citizens who came to the rally arrived and left in vans belonging to the Jefferson County Commission. The director of the County Office of Senior Citizens Activities, Barbara Bonfield, says she approved using the county vehicles, and she says they'll take senior citizens to any political rally they want to attend. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
I'll see y'all later.
That had taken place. When we arrived there, we found that this was the district attorney's child support office, which is just down the street from the suspect had entered the building, which apparently was unlocked, and then entered the district attorney's office there. They committed the burglary and stole a safe which contained about $2,500 worth of non-negotiable instruments and a payroll check. Since that time, through the efforts of the evidence section,
House Speaker Joe McCorkadale sponsored the measure during the recent special session of the Alabama legislature. That measure now carries his name. The measure would mandate the homestead exemption be doubled from $2,000 to $4,000 at the state level and would offer the higher exemption as an option to city, county, and school districts. Governor James was expected to veto the measure as he had other property tax relief bills passed during the special session. But in a prepared statement released today, Governor James says this property tax relief measure makes sense. Governor James says the provision of the bill providing the higher exemption as an option is based on a home rule concept. Governor James, in his statement, says that this option provides local governments the flexibility to decide their revenue needs against the tax rate base. The property tax on any residential home would be determined by how many of the city, county, and school district governing bodies in your area choose the higher option. If all three choose the higher option, then all homes valued at $40,000 or less would be property tax-free. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News. The homestead exemption bill was one of 3 tax relief measures passed by the legislature during the recent special session. The federal court struck down one which would have delayed reappraisal of property values. Governor James vetoed a second which would have ordered some counties to roll back their property tax rates. But the third, the homestead exemption bill, sponsored by House Speaker Joe McCorkadale, survived. The measure mandates the state double the homestead exemption from $2,000 to $4,000, and it offers the higher exemption as an option to city, county, and school districts, each of which levy their own property taxes. Governor James says the provision of the bill making the higher exemption an option is what convinced him to sign the bill. In a prepared statement, the governor says that the option provides the local governments the flexibility to address their local revenue needs against their property tax rate base and any increased revenues from reappraisal. The governor says it's the only tax relief measure that makes any sense. The measure also transfers the local tax revolt pressure from the state government to local government, since they must now decide whether or not they want to increase the exemption. The tax on your residential home will be based on how many of the local entities exercise the option. If all do, all homes under $40,000 would be property tax free. The fewer of the entities to choose the $4,000 exemption, the more you would pay. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Last April, the federal government pledged to give Alabama schools the funds, which were based on a 1970 census count of the number of low-income students. But in May, New York and several other states filed a suit seeking to halt distribution of the money because of 1980 census data showing Alabama had fewer low-income students than in 1970. Tomorrow, if a federal judge rules the money should be allocated based on the 1980 data, the state will lose about $10 million. Alabama and other states are fighting to see that that doesn't happen. The state is already suffering a $4 million reduction of federal funds because of the 1970 census data. The money is part of a $65 million grant, $56 million of which is already in the mail for Alabama schools next year.
We'll get the grant award, and we will notify the local school systems this weekend probably that the money is available. They will submit their applications to the Department of Education here, and they can begin to spend the money is what it amounts to at the local level as far as employing teachers, purchasing supplies to gear up for the beginning of school. That's critical.
Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
I'll see y'all later.
The fundraising lunch came first and attracted about 150 people at $100 a shot. Attending was a former Wallace cabinet head, Guy Burns, the vice chairman of the state school board, Dr. Harold Martin, and Alabama Power Company's vice president for financial affairs, Elmer Harris. Wallace's brief remarks to the group quickly turned into a full-blown speech. He told them he's running for governor because the state has such high unemployment, and his connections with business leaders all over the world will help him as the next governor to get more jobs for Alabamians. Later, at the rally opening his Birmingham campaign headquarters, the former governor said experience counts for a lot, and he has more experience as governor than the other candidates. Bill Edwards, a candidate for the Public Service Commission, was there, and Bill Baxley supporters showed up to hand out material promoting his candidacy for lieutenant governor. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
See, that's what I told y'all this
No
morning.
longer are the bats being found only in South Montgomery. Major Bill Hudson says they're all around.
We've got them from Maxwell, we've got them from McGee Estate, Forest Hills, Highland Garden, South Montgomery, below the Southern Bypass, in the narrow lane road, the Seth Johnson area, you know. So it's happening all over the city.
Rob Lockhart found and killed a bat in the Forest Hills area of town.
We located where the bat was at, behind the basketball goal, and found out that we could kill the bat with a stick. So we went ahead and I went ahead and killed the bat with a stick.
The state health lab processes the animals, checking for rabies. The bat's head is cut off so that specimens of the brain can be taken. Mike Faulkner says if the animal is rabid, the virus will show up in the brain. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Top of the first, the Braves jumped all over Cubs starter Ferguson Jenkins. This Chris Chambliss double down the line in right scores Glenn Hubbard with the first of 4 runs in the inning. Dale Murphy then follows with his 24th home run of the year. The 2-run shot to deep center gives Murph 64 RBIs on the season. That made it 3-0 Braves. 1 out later, Larry Wissington connects for this homer to right, his second of the year. And before the Chicago fans are in their seats, the Cubs trail it 4-0. It was 5-0 going to the bottom of the second when Larry Boa beat out this slow roller to short. Gary Wood scores from third, 5-1 Braves. Phil Niekro not only pitched well, but he helped his own cause with the bat in the third. He lashes this double to left, scoring Wissington and Ramirez. 7-1 Braves after 3. Jody Davis brought the Cubs within 4 at 7-3 with this 2-run blast in the fourth. But Bruce Benedict got those back in the fifth. A 2-run shot of his own put Atlanta up 9-4. They go on to win it 11-4 as Niekro goes the distance to get career win number 247. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports. After Montgomery Gray took a 1-0 lead in the first, the game settled into a pitching duel. The fifth inning was a perfect example. Jimmy Salter of Metro strikes out the side, ending with Sean Crane there. Jim Abbott returned the favor in the bottom half, getting Bobby Luna to fan here. Montgomery Gray finally broke through with some needed insurance in the top of the seventh. Runners on second and third. Shane Taylor delivers a clutch single back to the scorer Bobby Collins to make it 2-0 Gray. Abbott then set down the Metros in order in the bottom of the seventh, and Montgomery Gray was on their way to the state Dixie Major Championship. Overall. Rick Collins, WSFA TV Sports.
When any animal suspected to have rabies is found, it's brought here to the state health lab for tests. Lab technicians take specimens from the dead animal's brain to check for the disease. Major Bill Hudson of the Montgomery Police Department says the best precaution against rabies is to leave any dead animal alone. He says 15 bats being found since Monday is unusual, and they're trying to find out what's causing the problem. He warns pet owners to keep cats and dogs inside, especially at night, because if they come in contact with a dead bat, the pet could easily contract rabies. So far, 2 people are going through the rabies shots. They found and handled rabid bats, but the other bats found haven't been diseased. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Atlanta scored 4 runs in the first inning as Chris Chambliss lined a double to right field that scored Glenn Hubbard. Cub starter Ferguson Jenkins had more trouble. Dale Murphy followed with a 2-run homer to left center field. That made it 3-0 Atlanta. Atlanta pitcher Phil Niekro patted his own lead in the third when he doubled past Cub left fielder Keith Moreland. 2 runs came in. Atlanta was on top 7-1. The Cubs came back the next inning with this Jody Davis round tripper, making the score Braves 7, Cubs 3. The Cubs narrowed the margin to 7-4, but Braves catcher Bruce Benedict put the game away with a 2-run homer to left field. The Braves went on to win by a final of 11-4. Chet Kopic for NBC News.
It is now theorized that Tuesday's crash near Evergreen, Alabama, may have been an aborted landing attempt following a mechanical failure. The accident took the lives of 29-year-old Ensign Donald Knowlton of Colorado Springs, Colorado, and Lieutenant Commander Barbara Rainey of Siloam Springs, Arkansas. The 33-year-old Rainey is the first female flight instructor to die since the Navy began training women pilots in 1973. Officially, the Navy will say only that the accident investigation is continuing, but unofficially it's believed the T-34C trainer's controls malfunctioned, and the pilot was trying to make a small civilian airfield when the plane crashed upside down and burned. In the 5 years since the T-34C became the Navy's standard trainer, there have been 10 major crashes, 7 of those accidents involving loss of life, and 4 of the deaths have occurred in the past 6 months. The last accident, a mid-air collision in March near Jay, Florida, killed 2. There's increasing speculation the Navy is considering either a review of training procedures or an examination of the aircraft itself to determine what is going wrong. Ed Highland, News 10, Pensacola.
Mayor Falmer says property tax reappraisal will bring the city of Montgomery an extra $2.5 million next year. He wants to give more than half of it back. His plan, reduce the tax rate property owners pay to the city from 15 to 12.5 mils. Falmer says there'll be those who will oppose his plan.
Granted that there may be legitimate needs, but I think the homeowners and the property owners, the business people, the small business people have a concern too. And that's my job, is to do the best for them. We can adequately fund every city function that we have with a reduction.
According to the mayor's calculations, the city's taxes on a home appraised at $50,000 will drop from $75 to $62.50. Falmer was, of course, asked if his plan had anything to do with politics.
Everything I do, of course, is judged political and would have to be. I hold a political office. I'm seeking another one. I make no bones about that. Everything that I do has to be judged in that context.
So far, the mayor says he's not had time to find out what kind of support or opposition he'll have with the plan at Tuesday's City Council meeting. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
Mike Falconberry began testing the bats for rabies this morning. Some of the animals were so small, like birds, that he couldn't get a good smear of their brain tissue. That's the way the animals are tested for the disease. These 3 bats were brought in from Watauga County, Lynette, and Dothan. Falconberry cuts off their heads and takes a smear. Later, he looks at the slide under a microscope. If the bat is diseased, small green illuminated cells will be present. These bats show no positive signs of rabies. But Falconberry says a bat, or any other animal, can be a carrier of rabies and show no symptoms of the disease. He says there are two types, dumb and vicious. If an animal has the vicious type, it could attack. But an animal with the dumb rabies may act normal. Falconberry says the only way to make sure an animal has rabies is to test it. To make sure you don't contract rabies, stay away from any dead animal. If you find a bat in your yard, be sure not to touch it.
If the people that, do see these animals can send them to us if there's an exposure, as soon as they find them, then, we would be able to perform our FA test on it and to report the results to them, probably within the same day that we get it.
Two people in the Montgomery area are now undergoing painful rabies shots because they handled dead bats. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Have assisted us in this investigation.
Selma police say 22-year-old Deborah Ann Jones was babysitting at this house on Thomas Drive when two men broke in, strangled her, and then burglarized the house. Miss Jones' 5-year-old nephew, Scott Brady Jones, heard his aunt's screams for help and ran into the house. Police say he was tied up by one of the burglars and drowned in the bathtub. One of the suspects in the case lived across the street at 2894 Thomas Drive. 27-year-old Armand Joseph Jackson moved into the house just a week before the murders. He's been charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of burglary. Identical charges have been filed against this man, 22-year-old Johnny Calvin Akoff of Selma, in connection with the slayings. Selma Mayor Joe Smitherman says the arrests were made through a combined effort of members of the police department.
We feel enough evidence to have made an arrest a week or 10 days ago, but most of that would have been circumstantial. But now we have an even stronger case, and we can't go into many of these details because obviously it could affect the trial of these 2 individuals. But we feel very strongly this is an airtight case, one of the best pieces of law enforcement work I've seen in my 17 years as a city administrator.
Chief of Detectives Captain Billy Bobo says both men are being held without bond. Akoff is in the city jail, while Jackson is undergoing treatment at the Selma Medical Center for drug withdrawal.
Figures released by the Alabama Criminal Justice Information Center shows that Selma has the highest rate of violent crime per capita of anywhere in the state. Mayor Smitherman says he hopes the arrest in connection with this murder case will be a deterrent to crime in the city. Reporting from Selma, Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
You have no guarantee of a profit. You can't tell what's going to happen next month. I'm sure that if someone could guarantee you 15% or maybe even less, you would be very excited and be willing to take that. And this, again, is one of the problems we have with the utilities. The figure that all of them want to use is 18 to 20% profit. Personally, I think that's a little out of line with the economic world like it is today. Inflation in general is eating into their profits. Of course, we find in the case with AT&T, we're wanting a higher return for the investor. Obtained a federal grant, and we've got Auburn University over helping us spend it, and we hope in the very near future, we hope within 3 months, we'll have a computer setting up on the 7th floor of
I'll see y'all later.
That's the thing about it. A lot of these folks will get these animals, they'll see that they're...
Mayor Falmer's plan to reduce property taxes comes only 2 days after a federal judge ordered the state revenue department to go ahead with property tax collections based on reappraisal of property values. According to the mayor, this reappraisal will bring the city more tax money than it needs, so he's proposing a reduction of the city property tax rate from 15 to 12.5 mils.
I think this is a step in the right direction, and one that we can afford and still do those things that are necessary to deliver goods and services to our citizens, and at the same time take care of our employees in the manner that they should be.
When asked about possible political motives, the mayor said everything he does is judged to be political and would have to be. He says he holds a political office and is seeking another. Falmer says he doesn't know what kind of opposition or support he'll have to his proposal from the city council. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
And it smells, too.
The news of rabid bats in the area has prompted pet owners to get their dogs and cats vaccinated against rabies. Dr. Henry Adair says last week he had maybe 1 or 2 animals come in for shots, but this week he says he's had a tremendous number. Dogs and cats that stay outside at night are likely candidates to find dead bats in yards. Police and veterinarians warn pet owners to keep their dogs and cats inside, and if a dead bat or any other dead animal is found, call for assistance. The State Health Lab has been processing the bats, checking for rabies. Smears are taken from the animal's brain tissue and checked under a microscope for telltale cells of the rabies virus. The whole process takes about 2.5 hours. Officials don't know what's causing the bats to die or exactly where they're coming from. They've been found all over the Montgomery area and in nearby counties. Remember, if you find a dead animal, leave it alone and call for assistance from the police department or animal control. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Industry is not using gas, and industry is not using electricity like they were 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years ago. But we, the ratepayer, the ones of us that are, be it small business, residential customers, we're going to be asked to pick up that load that inflation and the bad economy has caused the industry to drop. And we're going to be asked to guarantee that company those same profits that they would be getting if industry had not taken that decrease.
Almost 3 months to the day, Deborah Ann Jones and Scott Brady Jones were murdered in this house. 2 suspects have been arrested in connection with the case. Some police say Ms. Jones was strangled during a burglary at the house, while her nephew was tied up and drowned in the bathtub after answering his aunt's cries for help. 27-year-old Armand Jackson and 22-year-old Johnny Acuff, both of Selma, have been arrested in connection with the crime. Both are charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of burglary. In a news conference today, Chief of Detectives Captain Billy Bolo told reporters that police developed Jackson as a suspect several weeks ago, but it wasn't until this week that all the pieces of the case fell together. Selma Mayor Joe Smitherman says police have an airtight case against the pair, and it's the best police work he's seen in 17 years as a city administrator. Authorities declined to go into great detail on what led to the arrest, only that a number of leads and recent developments fell together in the past several days. Police say Jackson, who's being treated at the Selma Medical Center for drug withdrawal, moved to a house across from the Joneses just a week before the murders were committed. Reporting from Selma, Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
Clampett came to the 18th, 10 under par, but still hadn't finished punishing the course.
Right at the flag. Marvellous stroke. And the applause should start for this young player any moment. Here it comes.
.67 yesterday, this for a 66.
Confident young man, what a way to finish. Dropped a stroke at the 17th. Beautifully played 18th hole. They don't come any better than that. And Clampett is in with a total 1-3-3. 11 under.
Chris was handing out advice on everything from practice schedules to diets, and after a brief question and answer period, she even showed a few of the luckier kids what it's like to return her famous two-handed backhand. Chris, of course, is coming off a tough three-set championship loss to Martina Navratilova at Wimbledon. She says the disappointment of that loss, though, has worn off.
I really think I took my losses worse when I was single and when tennis was the only thing, because I really, for about 3 or 4 years there, when I was in my early 20s, I based my happiness on if I won or lost tennis matches, because I didn't have anything else really cement in my life. But now with John, I mean, I can't really, it's not fair to him, I just can't dwell on it and mope around the house because I lost it. You know, it took me a week to get over it, and now I'm looking ahead.
Looking ahead, she says, to the Federation Cup next week and the U.S. Open later this summer. At age 27, Chris says retirement is still not in her immediate plans.
I'd like to play a couple more years because I'm really enjoying my tennis, and I have not reached my peak. I think that I still could be a better tennis player. And, you know, you lose Wimbledon, well, that's tough. I mean, you have to take the bad with the good. And I've had a great career, and I still think I could have a better career.
In Miami, this is Lee Webb for NBC News.
The Cubs picked up their first 2 runs on sacrifice flies. The second came in the 3rd inning when Ryan Sandberg fly to left here, scoring Bump Wills from 3rd. In the 4th, the Braves got one back after Dale Murphy tripled Bob Horner doubles to left off Alan Ripley. Murphy scores to cut the Cubbies' lead to 2-1. Bottom of the 5th, Bump Wills again on 3rd. Leon Durham rips this sharp double past first off Rick Mailer. That scores Wills and gave Chicago a 3-1 lead. But Atlanta fights back to tie it in the 6th. After Murphy led off with a single, he promptly stole 2nd and 3rd, and Larry Wissington then delivers an RBI double down the line in right. That made it 3-2 Cubs. Then an apparent inning-ending double play was muffed by Bump Wills at 2nd. Larry Wissington's able to score from 3rd, and the game is all tied at 3. And that's where it stood going to the 10th as the Range came to Wrigley Field, 3-3 after 9.5. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports. The Cubs scored their first 2 runs on 2 sacrifice flies off Rick Mailer, both times scoring Bump Wills. This one by Ryan Sandberg in the 3rd made it a 2-0 game. The Braves countered for 1 in the 4th off Alan Ripley. After a Dale Murphy triple, Bob Horner got him across, doubling to left past Keith Moreland, and the Cubs' lead was now cut to 2-1. Chicago added 1 in the 5th. Leon Durham rips a double past first. Bump Wills again scores from 3rd, and after 5, the Cubbies had a 3-1 lead. But Atlanta ties it in the 6th with Murphy on 3rd. Larry Wissington tests the line in right for an RBI double, and the Cubs lead now 3-2. It looked as though Chicago would get out of the inning when Rafael Ramirez grounded into an apparent double play, but Wills commits the costly error, allowing Wissington to score from 3rd. That tied it at 3. And that's where it stood until the 10th when the Range came, causing more than a 2-hour delay. And when play resumed in the top of the 10th, Jay Johnstone lines a 2-out opposite field single off Gene Garber, scoring Bill Buckner with a winning run. The marathon final, Cubs 4, Braves 3. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
If you like rags to riches stories, and most people do, sit back and enjoy this one. It's the story of a most unusual woman named June Collier. She was born June Mathis 48 years ago in Missouri, her parents owning a small farm and country store. As to their affluence, suffice it to say that the Mathis home was 5 rooms and a path, no indoor plumbing, no electricity. As these early snapshots confirm, June Mathis was a cute little girl. At age 2, bundled up in an overcoat and hat, At age 3, all dressed up in a party dress, and at age 4, not so dressed up as she posed with some cousins. Growing up on a farm, June was introduced early to such back-breaking chores as chopping and picking cotton. But by the age of 11, displaying a knack for figures, she was keeping the books for the family store. June Mathis grew up in a hurry. At age 16, she was not only a graduate of high school, she also had a husband. And it was in Macon, Georgia, where her husband was stationed with the Air Force, that June got her first job, working in an auto parts store for $20 a week. In the years that followed, her marriage having ended in divorce, she held a variety of clerical and administrative jobs before joining Mid-South Electrical Fabricators in Jackson, Mississippi, the forerunner of National Industries. In 1963, she went to work for National Industries under an unusual arrangement. Her salary was only $400 a month, but she was also guaranteed 10% of the firm's profits. National Industries prospered, so did June Mathis. In 1967, she married Ben Collier, one of the founders of National, and 6 years later they moved the operation to Montgomery. Today, Ben Collier is chairman of National Industries, June Collier is president and chief executive officer. Under her leadership, gross sales have climbed from $1.5 million in 1968 to an estimated $40 million this year. The company manufactures electrical wiring for the automobile industry. Several years ago, June and Ben Collier went into the oil exploration business, wildcatting it's called. A handful of Montgomeryans who had the good sense to buy a piece of this action at $50,000 apiece got a return on their investment of $500,000 in 2 years. The Colliers had a much bigger piece of the action. Their return was in the millions. This story tells it all. That's June Collier running through the oil field only moments after they struck it rich. Today, June Collier's net worth is conservatively estimated at $20 million. Not bad for a woman whose first job paid $20 a week. In recent years, June Collier has been highly visible and very vocal on the national political scene. She has waged a one-woman crusade trying to convince national leaders that some sort of restraint must be put on foreign imports if the U.S. economy is to survive. She is also deeply concerned about the ever-increasing foreign ownership of U.S. business and industry. She's buttonholed the likes of Vice President Bush, White House Chief of Staff Jim Baker, Senator Jeremiah Denton. She's addressed the Alabama legislature. No evangelist has ever preached the gospel of spiritual salvation with greater passion than June Collier has preached her gospel of economic salvation. June Collier, multimillionaire, the mother of 5, and a very interesting person.
The homestead exemption bill signed into law by Governor Fob James may mean a loss to the state of $10 million in taxes. But it comes at a time when statewide property tax reappraisals may mean a tax increase of $100 million. How it all adds up is, to at least some local government officials, uncertain.
Of course, my initial reaction is that I wish they had not given the local option. I think that the state government is usually very good at spending county money, but they're not very good at passing legislation that would give the county more tax revenue.
The Montgomery County Commission is one governing body now faced with the choice between doubling the homestead exemption on the local level or leaving things the way they are. Commissioner Frank Bray says a lot of factors must be considered.
You see, Montgomery County is kind of behind in many of the essential services, plus the fact that we are under what is tantamount to a court order to build a new jail. But the city has outgrown the present county courthouse, plus the fact that our schools are losing so much federal revenue.
Commissioner Bill Joseph agrees, saying too much is unknown now about the whole property tax situation. The county school board will also have to put a stamp of approval on any decision to cut property taxes at the local level. County Superintendent of Schools Henry Adair says there would be no way to accurately predict as of this time what any decision might mean.
There should be some go slow with this. There should be a lot of thought given to it, and then some figures would need to be presented as to how much revenue is going to be brought in.
Both the commission and the school board have yet to start official consideration of the tax measure. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Like a good deal in the first.
counting methods. All I can say is Selma's a peculiar type town in its population size. We're what you call a Class 5 city of 26,000 population. You only have 5 cities in that population category from 25 to 50,000 people. And our police department is a very sophisticated one. It probably is on par with Birmingham, not in number, but in the type of equipment and the reporting methods that we have. And you have a lot of things here. I don't know if this enters into it, where you have domestic fights and quarrels where the next morning, that night, the wife will swear out a warrant for assault with intent to murder against the husband, and then the next day she's down begging to let him off because he needs to work to provide income. But it's just hard for me to realize that we have that. Any crime is too much, but I don't like it, and we're constantly working on it. We have a good police department, and we have a lot of instances just such as I've talked about. But even though Birmingham's much larger, I see where they had 4 murders in the last 7 days up there, and I can't, so I don't know, but I don't like it. But Selma, we're having more crime now because of the economic situation. I've been in office some 17 years, and I've seen your ups and downs in the economy. And as the economy gets worse, you have more robberies, and robberies do lead to violence and things of this sort. So I think it's all over the country. But I'm sorry to see Selma listed number 1 in that category. But if we are, we are. But we're working on it. And but I just don't. It's hard for me to realize that we are.
In the section of Alexander City called Turtleneck, there was plenty of slow-moving action. Trainers lined up for those famous words, "Gentlemen, start your turtles." The 30-yard course is a tricky one with water holes and sand traps, but this fellow rounded Dead Turtle's curve with almost blinding slowness. This race was all Deacon's. His trainer, Don Holly, had a few nervous moments when Deacon ran out of steam short of the finish line. The Deacon pulled himself together and finished the course in about 5 minutes. All the contestants had more on their minds than victory or simple trophies. They were racing for charity. Race organizers Ellen and Kenny Dean hope to raise $3,000 or $4,000 for the American Cancer Society. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
The foot of the new bridge turned out to be the main drag for the island. It was here people came to meet, eat, and just plain old boogie in the sun, like 67-year-old Paul George. He was having a good old time. There didn't seem to be much evidence of the 50,000 people expected today. We were told to be patient.
Well, just give them a little time and they'll be here.
There were constant reminders of what life is all about this weekend on the island. If taking in beer wasn't your thing, then you could take in the sights at the fishing rodeo. That is, if you like looking at 100-pound sharks. They seem to look better on the land. On the other side of the island, the water kept the sun worshippers cool, but on the pier, things got really hot. Folks were surprised to find that once you paid your $1.50 to fish off the pier, there was no turning back. Even though tickets were issued, once you left the pier for whatever reason, let's say to eat, a return visit would cost you another $1.50. Temperatures started to rise.
Limitation on the people who want to fish on the pier. In other words, if you have an emergency, you just have to pay double. I don't know, it seems just a way to get extra money out of someone. That's all it is.
Putting all problems aside, merchants we talked to told us business was great. So great they didn't have time to talk to us on camera. All in all, the opening of the new bridge and the island seemed to benefit everyone. It even gave good old Star something to smile about.
You'll put a smile.
It was in 1972 that the federal court first said property values in Alabama were due for reappraisal. The reason? Past appraisals were not based on a statewide standard, so there were inequities in taxation. After years of delay, the reappraisal finally got underway last year. It's still incomplete. But state officials estimate when it is complete, property taxes both at the state and local levels will go up, a total of about $125 million. There has been a lot of talk lately about millage rates. Simply put, a millage rate is the percentage of tax on the appraised value of property. For Alabama, only 10% of the appraised value of property is taxable. For example, on a $40,000 home, only $4,000 can be taxed. The state millage rate is set by the Constitution at $6.50 per $1,000, so of the $4,000 taxable dollars, the state tax would be $26 a year. But the state has a homestead exemption of $2,000. In our example, that would be half of the taxable dollars, reducing state tax to $13 a year. Late last week, Governor James signed into law a bill that doubles the homestead exemption, so all of the $4,000 taxable dollars are exempt from state tax. But this does not account for local tax. City and county governments, as well as school boards across the state, all have yet to decide what they'll do about homestead exemptions. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Does everybody understand where we're going? Everybody you saw on the back, we've got gift certificates.
Folks, Alcazar Temple's having a motor run in September. We had one last done, this first one we ever had. We had 17 bikes.
We just more or less get together and have about an hour and 50-minute run, and then we donate the money to the Arthritis Foundation. This is our third annual run. We expect to do this usually in May, which is Arthritis Month. As everybody knows, arthritis is the #1 crippling disease in the nation, and we're trying to get a little more enthusiastic within the city and trying to contribute something to the cause.
After a 6-day manhunt, Carl Rupert Smith is still at large. Authorities have blocked off about a 10-mile area between the towns of Plantersville and Stanton in South Chilton County. Deputies from Dallas and Chilton counties are using a bloodhound to track Smith, finding trails they believe to be just hours old. The search for Smith focused on this area after a Selma man, Travis Barnes, said Smith kidnapped him yesterday afternoon and forced him to drive to a rural area just north of Plantersville. An investigator with the Chilton County Sheriff's Office believes Smith is in the area because Smith used to hunt around here.
That's one reason he was born and raised here, not far from here where he lived. And we believe he'll stay in this area because he knows where he's at.
Barnes also told authorities that Smith said he'd never face the electric chair. That's why another deputy thinks Smith has come to Plantersville to make a stand.
This is just speculation, that I feel like he probably will make a stand since he hadn't given himself up at this particular time.
Smith is wanted for the shooting deaths of his ex-wife, Norma Jean Ware, and her husband, Hugh Ware. They were fatally wounded last Tuesday outside the Selma factory where they worked. Reporting from Chilton County, Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
But we have got to build a football team offensively. And, but we're not where we were a year ago, because a year ago we had the same thing facing us, but we didn't have the talent to build one with. And we knew that. And so what we really wanted to do last year is we wanted to find 11 people who would go out there and fight their guts out for Auburn every down and every play and every snap. And be somebody that you could at least be proud of when the game was over, whether they won or lost. And I think we accomplished it. We probably handicapped our chances of winning a little bit, you know, by trying to get that so much. And we tried to do too many things offensively, I think, and we handicapped our chances a little bit. But this year, this football team is a little different. And I'm speaking from an offensive standpoint because we've got to do the same things, but we've got more talent and more ability to do it with. And that certainly makes us a little more excited about it, because if we do get it done, then we got a chance to have a fine offensive football team sometime during the season before the season's over. And if we do get it done this year, then we will have a good offensive football team going into next year, because we only have 2 seniors on our offensive team right now.
The Everly Brothers, the Chiffons, Fats Domino, Bruce Chanel, and all of their fellow rock stars from the 50s, 60s, and 70s are alive and well in Montgomery at the city's newest radio station.
This is Ryan Clark with you, and here's a song from 1966 with a Lovin' Spoonful on Z10.
WZTN, or AM10 as it's called, plays oldies and nothing but oldies. And program director Don Jones says the unique format of good old rock and roll is catching on.
People call us every day, want to know if there's anything they can do to make sure we stay on the air. The fans are loyal that love this type of music. They're crazy about it, and they love it.
But you might think the station would have problems finding all those old records to play.
We get phone calls. People say, hey, I've got so many oldies, or I've got a particular type of oldie. Maybe somebody's got a lot of the Beatles stuff. Somebody got a lot of Ray Charles, this type thing. The listeners are providing our music for us. You can't buy it.
And the amazing thing is, for those of us who remember these hits, is the fact that a lot of youngsters are hearing them for the first time.
When we came up with the idea for this particular format, we thought maybe our main audience would probably be 30 to maybe 50. But it seems like we're picking up a little younger audience than we had anticipated. The ones that are listening are of that age love it. They'd rather hear good old rock and roll as they had what's happening in today's music,
We'll be right back with more of that good old rock and roll following Alanet News, and we'll come back.
So as long as the staff can keep coming up with those old records, the station's nostalgia format will rock on, bringing back memories and exposing some young listeners to a whole new world of music that's really 20 or 30 years old. I'm Bob Howell, WSFA TV News.